Good morning and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we are looking at a tea that hails from Japan, Goishicha. Goishicha is an example of a very broad category of tea known as dark tea. The Chinese term is heicha and the Japanese term is kurocha. And very often websites will be labeling such teas as dark tea or very often as heicha. Goishicha is unusual even by the standards of dark tea. Dark tea has in common that all forms undergo, after processing, a, a degree of fermentation. They're all known as post-fermented teas. Goishicha goes one step further and undergoes actually two distinct fermentations. The first is caused by mold, and then the second is caused by bacteria. And it's that second fermentation and the chemical nature of it that gives the tea its characteristic sour or tangy smell and taste. And I think it's important to say sour and tangy because those have no negative connotations. This is actually, spoiler alert, an absolutely delightful tea. Let's take a look at the packaging, and that'll help us to understand where the name Goishicha comes from. I bought this tea from Yo-Yo Japan, although it is available from other vendors both within and outside Japan. But at the time, it was the only way that I could guarantee that I bought this tea in this original packaging. This is the tea that comes with the brand, the cooperative, who are behind manufacturing this tea. And I only needed to look at this package on screen to realize that I wanted to have this. It's incredibly bright, it's exuberant, and I really enjoy this. Now, most of the writing, I don't know what it's saying because it's in Japanese, but in the center, you'll be able to see, if I bring it up close, there are three characters, and these are probably going to be inverted on the camera, so any Japanese readers, please don't think that I am getting something deliberately wrong. So we have at the top here, Go, Ishi, Cha. Go is the name of a Japanese board game. Ishi means stone and cha means tea, a word that is used in many different nationalities. The reason for the name of this tea, Go Ishi Cha, is that the finished product resembles the playing pieces, the stones, the tiles of the Japanese game Go, hence Go Stone Tea. On the back of the packet, we have very commendably a huge amount of information. There's nutritional information for those who can read Japanese. There's the weight of the package. There's a best before date in in numbers rather than Japanese script, which I can read. And we have towards the top here two paragraphs. You won't be able to see them, they're sufficiently small. There were two paragraphs here that provide us with two different sets of brewing parameters, two ways to produce this tea. The second one produces a lot more tea, but it takes a lot of water and it takes a lot longer. That's not practical for our purposes. The smaller paragraph at the top gives us a way to brew tea for perhaps just one person or for a couple. And I've been able to deduce what that is because it says 350 cc, so that tells us the volume of water. It says 4 squiggly line 5, so that's somewhere between 4 to 5 minutes, and 3g, 3 grams. That's the amount of tea to use. One thing that puzzled me initially is that there's nothing here to suggest the temperature of the water. I was expecting something to say 100 degrees centigrade because that's what most other recommendations suggest. However, my daughter did some black magic with my phone and was able to translate some of this on the fly, as well as the fact that she has some grasp of Japanese characters, and the information says hot water. How hot is hot? I don't know. And I don't like not knowing. So I'm glad that most other suggestions are for a nice round 100 degrees centigrade. So that's what we'll be going with. Let's leave that external packaging for a moment and just take a very quick look at the internal packaging. I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see for any glare, but you have repeated in that wonderful font, Goishicha. And it's got a ziplock at the top. So that leaves us to move on to the finished product itself. What does it look like? And here we come to one of the most interesting things about this tea. This is an example of the finished product. It's a tile, a square of tea, perhaps 1.25 inches or 3 centimeters along each side, and maybe 1/8 of an inch or 3 to 4 millimeters thick. It is quite literally a tile composed of different tea leaves that have been cut differently across the grain for the different leaves. This arises after the secondary fermentation of the leaves. That secondary fermentation takes place in a barrel, and after that the compacted mass of tea is cut out of the barrel. I presume, because I haven't seen this, that this can then be separated into layers, and then these layers can be cut into these squares. I have seen photographs of what happens next as workers set out these still wet tiles of leaves on the ground to dry out in the sun. So what we're going to do while I have it here is see if there's anything that we can smell on the dry leaf. I'm not saying it comes out in the finished product, but there's almost something savoury in this. Reminds me of a cracker of some kind. So I find that double fermentation process very interesting about the tea. I find the finished product looks very interesting. I find the taste profile very interesting. There is another detail about this tea that makes it of some significance. Japan is noted for having very specific, very regional, very, very local teas. And of course, with the pace of modern life, as people move from the countryside into towns, there's a great danger that these very rural ways, these regional teas, can be forgotten. And that was very much the case with Goishicha. And I was able to find out that by the 1950s, there was only one producer remaining. However, the danger was recognized, and it was understood that the tea was going to disappear into the mists of history. And I am turning on my tablet to make sure I get this name right. The tea is now produced under the auspices of the Otoyo Town Goishi Tea Cooperative. They are the ones who are now tasked with ensuring that the tea remains in the public eye and is commercially viable and is commercially available. However, that whole process began in the 1950s, and the tea since that time has gone from being almost unheard of and almost unavailable to now being something that I can buy in this standardized packaging all the way thousands of miles away from Otoyo Town in Japan. I think that's enough information about the tea itself. It's time to move on to our equipment, and then we will start the tea brewing, and then I'll come back in 4.5 minutes, between 4 to 5 minutes, to look at the brewed tea. So what we need is our measuring jug for our 350 mils of water. We have our trusty pouring out jug, transparent, so that you and I can both see the colour of the tea. I have a different tea strainer to try out. You can see it's the shape of a saucer, and if I tip it over, you can see that the strainer part is just this white center, and it's got a shallow but very wide brim for catching the tea. Now, in the case of this tea with a prolonged steeping, it's not quite so urgent, but there are a lot of teas and a lot of ways of brewing teas that require a very fast pour, and you need something like this to catch the spills. We have a teapot, a small teapot. It's small because, first of all, we only need 350 mils of water, and second, because these tea tiles don't expand or disintegrate in the pot. In fact, even a second steeping and they're still pretty much intact, although they will have softened. So you don't need a big teapot. And I'm going to judge that with a tea only needing 4.5 minutes, I won't need a tea cozy. But if you'd used the other version, you might well do so. So let's introduce our tea tile to our pre-warmed pot. The water's already been poured off. The kettle is, as I am speaking to you, reboiling itself, which is ideal. So let's measure out our 350 mils of water. There we go. Let's make sure I don't spill this on myself, which would be a shame. And the tile is just floating pretty much intact. On the surface, there's a lovely herbal smell coming off it already. And we will leave this tea for 4.5 minutes. I'll see you in a moment. Welcome back. Our tea has now had its allotted time for steeping, and we can move on to pouring it out and trying out the smell and the taste of the tea. Eagle-eyed viewers might notice that there is a teacup in front of the screen. I only just remembered to go and get that before I started filming. So let's put our strainer in place. Let's get our tea poured out. Our strainer back on its stand. And let's take a look at the colour of the tea. Let me bring it close, see if you can gain... I think you can get a good look at it if the light is shining through. To my eyes, it's a combination of yellow and gold. It's a very inviting colour, very warming, if you can say that, about a colour. What's it like on the nose? The sharpness when it comes through, the tanginess. There's something sweet as well. And I think that's about it. It's a combination of sweet and fruity, I would say, and sharp. So let's pour this out and see what the taste is like. Yes, on the taste, the sharpness and the tanginess come through, but they're very nicely balanced by the sweetness. If I had to pin it down to a particular kind of flavour rather than something as vague as that, I would say gooseberries. Some reviewers have mentioned sour plums, but I'm afraid I don't know what those are like. But if anybody's familiar with gooseberries, then if I say it's like hot gooseberries, you'll know the combination of tangy and sweet. The only difference is, I would argue that this tea has a better mouthfeel than simply fruit juice. One of the things that people don't always know about tea or appreciate about tea is the way that it feels in the mouth can be something that contributes to the enjoyment. And this tea doesn't feel in the mouth as thin as merely fruit juice would. In fact, I'm going to try just a touch more, without wanting this video to go on for too long, just to see, just to convince myself. Perhaps it's the way that the tang gets to the sides of the mouth that gives it this mouthfeel, but it's certainly, in the end, more satisfying than simply warm fruit juice. So all in all, can I recommend this tea? Well, if we think in terms, practical terms, is it easy to produce? Yes, all we need is a teapot and a cup, eventually, and a strainer, and even the strainer is only a bonus, and of course we need a kettle. And if we're being very careful, a measuring jug, but you can do away with those if you absolutely have to do. Is it easy to obtain? Well, as I say, having done some research, it's available from different vendors in Japan. It's available from European vendors, it's available from North American vendors, and those are only the ones that I investigated. So yes, I can say with honesty that it is easy to obtain. Is it enjoyable? Well, it's very satisfying, and if you like tangy or sour as a flavor profile, then this tea is definitely up your street. I think the other thing that makes this tea interesting is the historical component. It's a tea with a long heritage, and it would have been a crying shame for that heritage to have ended in the 1950s. However, thanks to the sterling work of the kind of people who like to keep history as something living and alive, this tea is still available for you and I to appreciate. So, from me, it is a hearty recommendation, and it leaves me only to wish you happy steeping and to say, God bless.